that this is your Grandpa Don's podcast. We're talking here, Karla and I, together, and we're going to be having some reminiscing.
Yes, I'm excited to see how this works.
Well, we are right here now before Thanksgiving and Christmas, so we thought this might be the time to do a little reminiscing about, first of all, Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And what anybody remembers from our days of yore when we were little kids. I could probably start by saying that Thanksgiving was on the farm, a place where I grew up in South Dakota. That was, as I remember it, a time when we would be having my mother's sisters, especially from Sioux Falls, come to our farm, and we would have Thanksgiving together. Now, I don't remember the big thing about turkeys so much, because we didn't raise turkeys on the farm.
Oh, sure.
So chicken would probably be there, and ham would probably be there as part of our meal. I do remember one time, though, that my uncle Jerry Little, who worked for Nash Finch, which was a company that had grocery stores, and I think he got a turkey for, a present or whatever, and I can't say that I'm absolutely sure about this, but it's my vague recollection that he provided a turkey one time for our Thanksgiving. But otherwise, it was a nice social time. We'd be together. My mother loved to have that as her holiday, to have her sisters over. And these were people that were in the city, so being on the farm, that was really good for them. They loved to come out and check out the chickens and the pigs and the cattle and looking around on the farm. So that's what I remember for Thanksgiving.
Do you remember having side dishes with your chicken and stuff? Do you have?
I don't have any real sense of that being, a tradition so much, but I certainly believe it was something that we had grown, and the vegetables and so forth, potatoes,
sure.
Of course, and like I said, we had ham and we had chicken too. So that's kind of what I was raised on. We mostly butchered pigs, and then the chickens were really a big deal for our diet.
See, I don't think I realized that you had pigs. I mean, I knew you had, cows that you milked, and of course chickens seems like everybody had chickens, but I didn't know you guys had pigs.
Oh yes, that was one of the big things that my dad raised was pigs. We would have a number of sows that would give birth, and then those pigs were raised and fattened up, as they said, and sent to market. And I always thought it was interesting, and probably still true, that if what you did was you made sure that the pigs usually got to the weight of around 200 to 220 pounds before they were so-called ready for the market.
Oh, wow.
And so therefore, as I got older and started to gain weight, and I hit my 200 and 220 pounds, I was thinking maybe it was time for me.
Time to go to market.
Go to market, yes. So that's unfortunately one of the things I've thought about when I think about my dad's raising pigs.
So how many pigs did you have in a year, do you think?
Well, I would say that he raised at least 50 pigs for market, and maybe more. But that was, and we had a building built. I remember helping with that a little bit, and it was built with a slanted floor, concrete floor.
Okay.
With one end of the building kind of halfway open, which is strange when you think about winter time, pigs being raised out there in the farm on the winter. The idea was that the manure and all the waste that was from the pigs, that that would sort of go downhill.
Right, right.
And so it was an idea. Don't know that that idea still exists anywhere, but I remember that was a fad, if you would, at the
Sure.
time. Yeah. So we had water places that, we did have, by that point, we did have a water system that had pressure. We had a pump in the basement of the house that ran the water when you opened up the tap, and that was that was throughout the barn and the pig house and the other building that we called the pig parlor, and did I say the chicken house too? But we had water then to be able to water our livestock, as
Sure.
well as to get water ourselves. Because otherwise, as a real young kid, I was the one with the water pail to go out and pump
yeah.
water or get the water from the windmill that was pumped up to bring into the house to drink. Yeah.
Okay, so you had a windmill do the work of the pumping then.
We did.
And does that mean, was it every time the wind blew and the windmill was pumping that it would be pulling water up then? Or was that something you had to turn off and on?
You could turn the windmill off if you had enough water.
Okay.
And there was a, big like a stick, on a wire thing that you'd pull down, and then that would tighten it up and straighten up the windmill, the wind blades, so that they'd end up heading into the wind, and then it would start pumping. And then if it was windy out and you didn't need to have the water pumped, why, you just had the windmill turned off by just putting that up. Yep.
Huh, I didn't realize that. So now we know how many pigs you had. How many cows did you have?
Again, that's pretty vague in my memory, but I would say 20, 25.
20 to 25. Interesting. Yeah, with Kristen and I working at NASDA doing egg surveys, I feel like I have to ask you how many cattle you were running and how many pigs and chickens and how many acres to wheat and how many.
Well, yeah.
That was all our conversations with the farmers, right? But
and that was something you were doing just a few years ago?
Yeah, well, that was when Josiah was a baby. So Kristen, I think, would it have been the twins that she ended up having? I don't remember. I just know she worked there, and then I got a job there, and I sure learned a lot about farming during that time period and realized how little I knew about geography, because I'd call a farmer and start asking him questions, and he'd say, well, don't you know I'm in the part of the state that's flooded? And I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, I did not know that. But it was really interesting to talk to the farmers, especially I think because we have that in our heritage, and that's something even this summer when we were doing the family garden in Fargo, Zebediah told the organizers that this is his heritage.
Good,
growing stuff.
Growing food is really important in our lives.
Yep, and I think about your dad and how even after you were off the farm, he had that big garden, and boy,
yes.
he was quite a guy that way.
And when I was a kid, we had a big garden too on the farm.
Did you? Okay.
Yes, I remember us having. And my mother was much the one to organize it, I think. But like a lot of gardens probably today, string beans, that was a big deal. We could have a lot of string beans, and canned in those days, the string beans. In the early spring we would get radishes. That was always fun, to have a little early radish. And then onions.
Okay.
We'd plant onions, so we would have onions of different kinds. And then there was the melons, but we didn't have watermelon and that sort of thing so much, but it was mostly, I guess you would say, squash that we raised. Mm-hmm. The watermelons, they were popular out west of us. If you drove from our farm north of Salem, South Dakota, up to Huron,
Okay.
which is where the state fair, has been
Sure.
and always is. There was a part along the road where the farmers raised a lot of watermelons, and so you would see watermelon
Oh, wow.
stands, especially during the fair in the fall. And so
Nice.
we'd always, if we go to the fair, which wasn't often, but we did, we'd stop and buy watermelon on our way back home.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
So when you were growing all those vegetables, then did you end up having a time of like harvest and then preserving them? Did your mom can a lot of
absolutely,
things?
yes. Like I said, string beans, they were
Oh,
a big
yeah.
thing. I'm trying to think. We didn't raise peas. It didn't seem like that we could get enough quantity on that.
Right, right.
And
Did you do,
carrots.
oh,
Carrots was big.
Okay.
Yeah, and we canned, and my mother, my dad too, canned the carrots.
Oh,
So
nice.
carrots and beans. And then what I remember early on was that with the chickens, when we would butcher chickens, my mother would cook them and then can the meat.
Oh, wow. That's
The
cool.
meat was canned rather than anything else, stripped off the bone, and
Sure.
I don't know what recipe she used, but it was always good.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, so there would be a gallon jar, no, yeah, a quart jar, I'm sorry.
Sure, sure.
A quart jar of the meat. So it was easy on Sunday to come home after church, and we would probably have a jar of string beans, and we would have mashed potatoes,
Sure.
and then the chicken in the canned thing, that would be heated up, and
Oh,
the
wow.
juices in that were kind of like our
Kind of like gravy.
gravy to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could put the chicken over the potatoes, and it was very
Nice.
tasty.
Oh gosh, that would be such a nice thing on a Sunday to not have to, like do
Right.
a bunch of complicated cooking.
Absolutely.
So with the potatoes, how did you store those?
Well, the earliest time I remember was we had a cellar,
Okay, yep.
and that was before we had a basement.
Oh, sure.
So in a cool place as best we could, and the cellar was a good place. But yeah, that was one of the challenges, to keep the potatoes good enough
Yep.
through the winter.
Yep. Yeah, did there come a point usually where your potatoes weren't so good anymore and they were just kind of getting ready to be planted, like sprouting
I
everywhere?
am certain that would have happened.
Yes, it seems like that'd be just in time to be like, all right, we got to put these in the ground again. So that's interesting. I have a friend back when I was a kid, Tony Beaver. I don't know if you remember
Yes.
her in Thief River Falls. Her house had a cellar under it that you accessed through the bottom of a cabinet door, like the bottom of a
my.
cabinet. So you'd open the cabinet up and you'd have to take the stuff out that they stored in there and then remove the trap door kind of thing and then climb down. And they still stored their. Her mom did some canning, I guess, and so they
Yeah.
stored things. But I can remember as a kid looking down at that, and I think I'd been reading maybe Little House on the Prairie and some of those books, and I thought, this is probably what they did, as they kept all their
of
produce
course.
down there as long as they could. And
Yeah.
I know for me, having stored produce at the times when we've had access to garden things, we did like a, what is it called, where you buy a share in a farm, and then we'd get the box of food.
Yes.
We had one of those that we got to go and pick squashes and stuff and take as much as we wanted. And so we had a lot of squash then, and to keep that good through the winter, even in modern days, you're like, okay, so we got to find a kind of cooler spot and, not, yeah, it was interesting stuff. But so that food will last pretty good if you take care of it.
Yeah.
So
And another thing that we did can, and I forgot about it, was beets.
beets, oh, yum.
We had a lot of beets too, and they were usually canned in pint jars
Okay.
for our quantity.
Sure. So did you pickle the beets then, or did you just can them more like just a water
Canned,
canning?
yeah,
Yeah,
diced up and
diced up. Oh, I love
put
beets
into
so
the-
much.
in the and
So did you guys do tomatoes?
oh yes,
Yes. Okay. And what did you make? Like, did you just do tomato sauce then that was canned? I can't imagine you were doing
Absolutely
salsa.
not.
I don't
Absolutely
know.
not. It was
No?
mostly just slicing the tomatoes and eating
Oh,
them
oh, well,
that I
there you go.
remembered.
Slicing them and eating them.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I guess maybe my mother did can the tomatoes too. Some she
Sure.
would do that too. That's true.
But you probably wanted to eat as many as you could fresh, huh?
And we would, yeah.
Yeah,
That was
yeah. So how
always.
did you, now did you put salt or sugar on your tomatoes?
I seem to have preferred salt rather
Yes.
than sugar.
That was
Although I don't
something,
think I would be offended by either
I
one.
know, right? That's something I remember from my childhood is we'd have tomatoes and they'd be sliced up and then either people would put salt or sugar on them. And
Yeah.
I was sugar. When I was a little girl, I thought that's how if you could put sugar on something, maybe that was good.
That was
So,
probably how our culture was emphasizing sugar. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of the
And of
funny,
course, we're all over sugared in
yes.
our society today, which is not always
And see,
good.
back then, if you were having sugar, you were working it off with all the farm chores and stuff.
I
And
would say
that's,
so. We were a lot more physically active, of course,
yes,
than I
yes.
see us today. I mean, when you're living
Right,
in the city, so to speak, or suburbs or whatever,
right.
you're not out there doing a job outside working, your
Yep.
body and shoveling things and all the
Right.
business that you would do. Yeah, you're not needing as much of those things, I guess.
Right. Yeah, when I have very clear memories as a little girl reading Farmer's Boy from the Little House books, and then reading that again to my older kids when they were little. And that was the story of Alfonso and his boyhood. And that kid ate food. Like just the descriptions of
Yeah,
his breakfasts and lunches and stuff, but he was a hard worker. He was out there in the
right.
early morning doing farm chores. And, I guess I've always thought that was probably somewhat like what you lived like.
We kind of wandered away from the holidays with
Oh,
our
we sure
talk about
did.
the food, which is a great thing because food is what we think
Food
of for
is,
our
yes.
holidays.
Yeah, so
And I think you are the culprit in the family story, as far as I'm concerned. When we were in Thief River Falls, I remember us having Thanksgiving. At least that's my memory of it, the place of it. And it happened to be a year when my birthday was on Thanksgiving Day. And I'm sure this story has
yes.
been told ultimately many times. But I'm going to put this on the record.
Yes.
And that was when I sat down. We had our wonderful Thanksgiving meal, like we talk about with turkey and dressing and all the things. Well, you very methodically looked at me and said, "Dad, why is it that everybody is eating turkey on your birthday?" And of course, I couldn't respond to that because he immediately responded by saying, "Dad, that's because you are a turkey." Do you remember that?
Now that you bring it up, I absolutely do. I remember being very proud of that joke.
Yes, you were.
Yes.
And my goodness, it stuck.
It did. It stuck. I don't know when you started doing the turkey sound, but that has been part of our life this whole
Yeah.
time because I can remember being little and you doing that and thinking it was the coolest thing in the world. So
I guess it must have been because we were living in towns that were places where turkeys were prevalent, like,
yeah,
like Pelican Rapids.
right.
There were a lot of turkeys there, and Thief River Falls, too.
I think, did Pelican have the processing plant for
Yes,
turkeys? Because I
yes,
remember going on a field trip there
sure,
and being absolutely horrified. That's what I remember because
exactly.
it was knee deep in turkeys. That's what that was.
And then when we were in Thief River Falls, you just went down the street to the west, not very far, to the railroad tracks, and that's where the turkey plant was.
Oh, really?
In Thief River Falls.
Oh,
yes.
interesting. Yeah, that's not too far from that house.
So turkey processing plants were prevalent in areas that we were living at the time.
Probably because, you were a turkey, and that's why we had
Well,
to
you
live
must
there.
have confused me with the feathered friends.
Yes,
that,
yes.
I don't know if I was feathering myself that day or not, but I didn't realize I looked like a turkey.
I was a clever child. What can I say?
Yeah. So the jokes have been going on about the turkey.
Yes.
And we know this being true, that in years that followed, I remember when I must have taken you or Kristen or both, or I don't know. It was a youth ministry thing, and it was not just our little church, but it was, a group of churches, and we had this music group, that was doing some of the contemporary music of the day for youth ministry. And I don't remember the name of the group, and I don't remember anything else about them except, of course, the turkey song.
Is that where that came into our lives?
And their setup on it had been that they were talking about, relationships, and how when you're in close relationship with people, there can be a little, sort of irritation, you get on each other's nerves and so forth. And so this was, their story of saying, that's the way life is. And when we're here and when we go on tours with each other and we're, working together and, trying to figure things out, we can get on each other's nerves too.
Right.
And so on basis of that, they said they wanted us to know the turkey song because it was one of the songs that they would sing when they got on each other's nerves. And it goes, and if God can love turkeys, God can love you, 'cause you are a turkey, but I am one too. So if you're lonely, remember this truth. If God can love turkeys, God can love you. So I would say that's a good Thanksgiving song.
It is a very good Thanksgiving song.
Yeah, it was, of course, the poor turkey has been maligned as a reputation. To be a turkey as a human being is to be pretty dumb, basically.
Yes.
And so that's, kind of an insult for people to talk about each other being a turkey. But when you make fun of it, then, that's how you handle how mean people can be sometimes, meaning that you're really dumb, and so they're talking about you as a turkey. But, I just make it a laugh point. It's a way to handle some of these.
I think, too, it becomes part of the special culture of your family that this now is kind of a compliment. You know what I mean? Like in my family, it's kind of a compliment to be called weird. Like we almost strive to be weird so that we can get that compliment. So I think turkey is kind of...
In order to be accepted as a normal part of the human community that you have as a family, you're saying that weirdness is the normal
that is what's normal
part of it. And weirdness has certain characteristics.
Yes.
And apparently you all embrace them.
We just embrace them. That is, if you're going to be it anyway, you might as well make it a goal and be something to be proud of.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so now I am very, very proud of my dad's turkey noise, and that we got to have that in the podcast. That's a thing that has to happen. So
well, let's see if the time is running out. This is getting a little lengthy.
Yeah, so I think the ending of it could be the turkey.
Okay, and I don't know if I can do the turkey sound the way I used to anymore because I'm kind of out of practice,
Yes.
And but if you got to shake your cheeks a little bit so you get a little warble in it, and then you got to put your voice up real high, and then you try to go like this. Now, if you go online and check out what a real turkey sounds like and compare it to me, it may not sound like much.
But see, the problem is I'm not here to make you practice this all the time. That's the actual.
That is true.
Yeah.
I don't do that. So I'm sure that in our family, and we have grandkids listening to this, I think that they probably have the capacity to
Yes.
to become the turkey warbler champions.
Yes.
Maybe it's a competition that maybe
I
we could
think so.
suggest that is, part of the Thanksgiving tradition at some point in the future.
I think this has to be.
I'm just bringing up ideas. I'm not saying anybody has to do this, but of course I'm just bringing up ideas. Well, this has been fun.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I hope those of you that were listening, if you were, that you learned something about our family.
Yeah.
And so with that, Karla, thank you for hanging out with me and doing this podcast.
You bet.
Have a good day, everyone.